the drug police officer is necessary, and the dispatcher with the increase around the clock, I think, is also necessary. But if we delay that 6 months, that'll give us a half price. The library, I started going through itemizing the different things in the library, books and hours and the same type of things that we were talking about. And because the library budget is kind of like the Board of Ed budget, we don't actually affect each individual line item. I just totaled it up and said $15,000. 421, 422, there's some material for increased material that didn't seemed like we could take $2,000 off of that. And then park maintenance, again, we have beautiful parks. If we spent a couple less hours maintaining them, I don't think anybody would notice. So, yeah, I mean, seriously, right?
It's
I
true,
mean,
they're beautiful.
last year they came by and they showed all this information that says we have award-winning baseball fields. Well, I'd like
They are nice.
just a little bit less than award-winning. I think there's probably a couple of,
red ribbon instead of the blue ribbon.
you know, I mean, yeah.
Go for the red.
Second
We are the
place.
runner-ups. The runners-up.
We want to be good, but not too good.
It's, you know, I mean, it's money you gotta spend, and I don't wanna spend it. So I'm okay with being really good fields, not top of the notch fields. So all that comes up to $103,000. Like I said, I had the other $21,000 for acquisitions in there, and that's kind of where I'm at. Okay. So we have a range from John's $9,000 to Camille's $270,000. Lisa's right behind her with $225,000. We got three of us at that $100,000 range. So,
Three of us are at 300,000? What?
no, three of us are in that $100,000 range. So Ann, Jason, and I are in the $100,000 range. You and Lisa, 270, 225. So, typically what we do, after we give these suggestions to our first selectman, we make a motion for how much to cut the general fund by, or the general government by, and then he goes off and he figures out, takes all our input and does his magic and figures out where he thinks the right places are, and then he comes back and presents to us an amended budget based on the dollar value that we gave him. And I think that's the next step that we need to take, is between the six of us, we have to determine where we think the consensus is on a dollar value, give that to the first selectman so that he can go off and take this input and come up with an answer that matches our answer. Okay.
When you were, I think, the two heavies, figure-wise,
Gee,
you were
thanks.
counting the 39,000. You were counting the $40,000 you took out
Figure-wise.
of Joe's,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So that $40,000 is an easy one. It's already been done.
It's already
so
done,
that
yeah.
we kind of start at 40, right? And I think some
Yeah.
of you didn't mention it, so you probably
Right,
weren't even
thank you
figuring
for that.
40.
Yeah.
And
No,
obviously you weren't.
no,
You're at
what-
9. So.
what 40
No,
are we?
I
And
did,
the
Public
third-
Works
no,
budget
I-
that
you
we
said
did into the
75, we
capital
went
plans,
25,
so
you were
the
just
general
So-
government is
Yeah.
already down by 40.
And
I-
Ann
I
specifically
already-
mentioned it.
I
wrote it down.
specifically
You
mentioned
did
it.
count it.
Yep.
But I wanted it out of there, and then I did my other cuts.
You're right.
and-
I didn't see.
So,
In addition.
so when I totaled up your 75 to 125, I didn't include that 39,000 I
Okay,
know,
so-
because I knew that, yeah, so you had 25 and then 50 to 100.
Yes.
I didn't use the 39,000.
Yes, correct, yeah.
For Camille's, I started off with the 270,000 and then she itemized afterwards, so I didn't add it back in. And Lisa talked about staffing and she didn't address it one way or the other, so.
Remember, it's a push though in the bottom line,
Yeah, it's,
so.
Okay.
So, okay, and so, are we in agreement on that? I mean, we're in agreement on the, having moved the 40,000
yes, yes.
out. Okay,
I think
so-
Mark's point was that if you came up with a total, just make sure you're not double bookkeeping, that
Yes.
you've taken it out twice.
Yeah.
Part of the number.
Okay,
Hence-
Well, I sort of think we should act as if that never happened. Because we're looking at
My 40 wasn't in the 270.
And we shouldn't look at it as if it is, because we already inflated the capital budget accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're looking at a bottom line number, we should just pretend we haven't moved it to the other side of the balance sheet, or not the balance sheet, but the other fund, and just think about the numbers that we put forward, just like we had, regardless of the 3909.
Yeah.
It's gonna come out, so whatever our changes are, essentially, we're gonna add 40,000 to it, but we need to do that because we added it to capital.
Okay. So, what we need to do now is start kind of hearing what each other said and start thinking about, as a group, what do we really think the best number is? We can't all have our own numbers. We need to think about. I'm sorry, did you say something?
No, I was just.
Well, I think a lot of it's gonna come down to what we think about the staffing, the proposed changes in staffing, because that's where the bulk of the cost is.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to just, I guess that's really gonna be the nut, decide, are we in favor of adding a policeman? Remembering that there isn't any data that shows us that our town is growing. And we're proposing a new dispatcher, a new policeman, and the firefighters, which we're not gonna pay the salary for, but we're gonna have to pay the benefit packages for those. I don't know if there's any other staff changes that I've overlooked, but I just don't think this is the year to do that. I don't see the town growing enough to support those changes.
Let me add one thing.
Sure.
I agree with you about the town population is, at this point, is flat. But that's for 6 months out of the year. The other 6 months in the summertime, population goes up to around 30,000.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I think we need an extra policeman.
That's always been the case, though. There's nothing different going on this budget year than there was last year.
Well,
Summer comes every year.
well, that's probably why the overtime is so high, because of all the events they have to attend. It's, and now with Costco coming in and the new apartments,
Kind
I
of where I'm
think-
thinking is, to me, it comes down to, like I said, when he was presenting, it's a
Yeah.
quality of life issue. In the event that we have an increased drug use in town,
that
he
too,
said we do, I don't have I can't say statistics,
statistically.
but if we had statistics that showed, I did, it just took me 3
Okay,
tries.
well, but we can
So-
wait till Costco comes.
So the point, well, that's why I said, to me, I think there is increased drug use. I have heard our first selectman say that we've had more opioid overdoses, and we've had a lot of opioid, gotta go to sleep, related drug issues and things like that. I think, based on news articles that I've read up in my favorite hotel, I think there is increased drug use in town. I do think I've seen results of that.
Close the hotel.
Yeah, you don't have the right to do that. I don't have the power to do that. I wish I did. So, I think there's a need.
Well, they said,
I think everything we've seen for statistics for town sizes, sounds like we don't have enough police officers.
well, they said when they were in front of us that they don't have a police officer they can assign to look at this opioid crisis. They need a detective to take one of the police officers off the regular patrol, assign him as a detective to concentrate on this crisis that we have with drugs, and then hire one to replace him at a lower rate.
And when I said, yes, you do, you could reassign anybody tomorrow if you chose to. He said, well, yeah, I could if I wanted to. He could tomorrow say, you are now our drug officer, that's your full-time job.
Right.
He can do that tomorrow.
I know.
Okay. So,
I heard him say that too.
But he doesn't have, then he wouldn't have enough cops to cover the minimum
Yeah.
shifts without dipping into
And then
overtime.
the overtime goes up.
he would have choices tonight.
Right.
If I
Yes.
can go back to the chief's presentation, the 2 points that I think stood out in my mind that he articulated was, one, the narcotics use problem, the narcotics sales, and I think a cursory look every day in the newspaper on your police logs will give you a hint. You know the region has been plagued evidence of the major drug busts that we had in the area. So I think that, you know, we're putting our heads in the sand if we kind of ignore his point. I think his point's well taken on that. And I could go on that for a while, because it's something I do read a lot about. And that was his one point, his main point. And his second point was that he feels his staff numbers are really not consistent with, you know, a town of this size and the types of issues that we do face. So I think, you know, adding that narcotics specific officer, and it won't drain the remaining staff. So I think those are 2 points, and 2 points that are really important and should be taken together, you know, in my mind. So I am personally, I'm on board with it. I think we have from my reading, a very serious problem in this area. I mean, and it's, you know, the towns look innocuous. They look like nothing's happening, but things are happening, and I think we need to address it from the public safety standpoint. So, you know.
Policing is different than it was just 10 years ago. You know, the advent of body cameras now and all that. It's a dangerous world out there. It's not just the drugs, but it's the result of the drugs. It's the car accidents. It's the burglaries that our neighbors are getting broken into, right? It's the
Right.
car burglaries. And then it's the violence that's going on at Ocean Beach had a riot last year. The Sound River, the Old Lyme Beach had a riot down there in the afternoon one day.
Not enough ventilation?
Well, it was all the kids were out,
Soundview.
seniors were out, they were, and then it got to be a thing. It was a day off before graduation. Police work is different, and the amount of work and paperwork and evidence, everything that goes into it, it's different than it was 10 or 20 years ago. Their argument, the police commission's argument is that don't look at, last year versus this year, look at 10 years ago versus now. We have the same number of cops on, virtually. We don't know when that will change. And I'm not gonna argue that tonight, but we need more cops. We needed more cops. They want more cops.
The median age in Niantic is 47 years old. And I don't know, everybody to me looks like they're in their 60s. I mean,
That's because you're in Niantic, I'm in Flanders.
okay, so I'm just saying, you gotta look at the characterization of, well, you're getting there, dude, if you're lucky. You look at the characterization of the population, and you know what, we've heard Mike Schultz come in here pretty much every meeting we've had as a business owner in town, and talking about the taxes he pays, and how they're increasing every year, and how it's compromising his business. I have personally been called by 3 business owners in town who have asked me for support in keeping taxes lower because it is pricing them out of business. They're thinking about moving to other towns, and we're talking about trying to bring revenue into town. Pricing businesses out of town, I don't think is the way to go on that. And every year we get people with wants, and I guess it can be defined when the want becomes a need, but it's often arbitrary. I really think we've got to be mindful about tax increases, and they are only going to get worse. They're only going to get worse. And I really think we need to do some hard work here.
One last comment I wanted to make, and I meant to. Costco opens in 9 months. This budget covers the opening of Costco, and what's going to happen to the traffic is the novelty of a Costco in southeastern Connecticut arrives on our streets. So you're talking about wait for it to open. This actually is the budget that will cover it when
Right.
it opens.
Which is the
money will
problem.
trail that.
Right.
Right.
The money's coming in the subsequent
But
fiscal
the
year.
policing needs and the safe needs of our citizens, the people visiting our town,
Let's make it
will
work.
happen now.
That's why I think,
This budget.
a half ahead would
What's the
start it in 6 months.
Targeted opening, March now?
They've never
November.
officially slipped the schedule, so technically it's still in November, but it might go to February, it depends on DOT.
February, March. And what about the Gateway Commons, Mark? Like,
Those apartments, those
Yeah.
are much later,
Yeah.
I would think.
much later?
Much more detail in building apartment versus the warehouse.
And how long will the police be in their current building? How fast can they move out?
It's up to Lisa.
I'll get back to you on that.
I am so on it.
I want to get that property on the market.
I
fast.
gotta prove it. I walked it. There's 2 subcommittees that are working hard on this. The RFPs are in. They're putting a scope of work together. But I think the better part of 9 months, or it won't be the end of this year. It'll be at the same time, the end of this year, beginning of next.
Want to sell both buildings. I wanna sell the dispatch building and I wanna sell the one on Main Street.
Yeah, I'd love to do it before
Yeah, yeah.
before winter,
That'd be
because
awesome.
I have
Okay.
we have heating bills.
Yeah.
Just one last
Are
point.
built into the
Um,
budget.
Just one
Yeah.
last point, to your point, Mark, that was another point that the chief made that night of the presentation, was that with Costco coming on, there's that, tremendous surge in need, so that was yet another rationale. But, so you'd say there's basically three, I guess, if you include that one.
Are you ready for a motion?
Oh my gosh, where would we start?
Yeah.
So, here's where I think we're at. I think where we're at is we need to come up with a dollar amount that we're at. I think if I take all the things that we've been presented before us, if I take everybody's best wisdom, and I take the average of the four,
Take the median, not the average.
the median gets harder because I can't do that on my calculator. I could do that in Excel. So, is there a motion? Yes, I'm willing to hear a motion for what we think we should decrease the general government by.
So I will make a motion based on everybody's comments, knowing this is not Lisa's board. I would prefer, clearly I am in a camp of cutting more, but I listened to what everybody said. So, based on what I hear, I'd like to make a motion to cut the town budget, the, whatever we're calling it, general government budget, by $185,000.
I have a motion to decrease the general budget for $180,000. I am sorry.
$185,000.
185.
I prefer more, but I probably
$185,000.
can't get your support for that.
185,000. Okay. I have a motion to decrease the general government budget by $185,000. Do I have
And
a
that doesn't
second?
include the 40. No, it doesn't include the 40. The 40, or, I said we can't think about the 40, because we already drove up the capital budget by 40.
Right.
So we're gonna pretend it didn't happen for the sake of this discussion.
So then you would say that you would like to decrease the proposed budget. If I add that 40 in, 5, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 2, that'd be 225,000 below the initially proposed
Posted number.
18,678. So you're saying you would like it to be $225,000 less than that initial budget?
Yeah, because the 40 already, just, right, the 40 already got added into capital.
185 additional, $1,000 of additional cuts on top of the 40.
Yeah.
39.
So essentially, it's one, if you
225.
225.
But as I said, remember, we should, for purposes of mentally thinking about how we're gonna characterize the budget, the 40 shouldn't even enter into our heads, because we already added it on the other side, so it should naturally come out on the operating budget, and not even think about it. That's how we get to zero. So it's really only 185 net that I'm asking for your support on.
Okay, so I have a motion to change the, it's gotta be 225, understanding that it's already been subtracted from the capital. I understand that, but we need to affect this line item here in the budget. Right, we need to affect this,
That's the capital, I don't want that.
this one here, debt service, total government budget, right here. Boom.
40,
So this number here, this 18,7. Okay. So I have a motion to decrease the 18,678,733 current or proposed general government budget by $225,000, with the understanding that 39,000, whatever the other
909.
changes,
Included
has
in that
already
number.
been moved into the capital plan.
It's clear.
Okay. Do I have a second? Do I have a second?
I will second that, so we can discuss that.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion about the motion before us? I will share my opinion. My
I'll
opinion.
go.
Huh?
I'll discuss it.
Okay, go ahead.
I think the 185 is way too high. I can be convinced otherwise, but my thinking at the moment is around 100, give or take. I just want to be convinced that extra $85,000 is justified being taken out of the general government. That's my opinion.
Okay, John thinks it's excessive. He thinks 100,000 would be a closer number. Further comments?
I stand firm on not really supporting any new hires this year, so my increase would have been much greater than that. So I'm comfortable with 225, because I know nobody's gonna agree to what I'm suggesting. So
Okay.
I'm thinking that's the next best number.
So Camille's okay with 225 because she would like it higher, but she thinks it's as high as it's gonna go. Ann?
I think it's too high, because I am supporting, in my mind, the public safety, various initiatives for the added personnel. So, I'm in a, closer to the 100,000 range.
Okay. Jason?
I think it's a little bit high, but I'm more, well, I guess it's 225, not 185 because of the 40.
The 40,000 has,
So don't think about the 40, because that's already
Yeah,
done.
it's just gonna come off the
That's
top.
just-
Do you
yeah,
think we can shave off another 185 based on all the
yeah.
comments of?
I took an average of what we had. I apologize, John, I didn't include you for the $9,000, so.
I didn't either.
That's an outlier.
yeah,
And that, it was about 180, and so. just-
162 if you take the average.
Okay,
but,
yeah, so that's by averaging everybody out, that's where I got it, so about 185 or
Okay.
182, whatever you came up with, I don't think it's.
Okay. So, any other discussion about the motion before us? I do also agree that I think it's too high. I initially was higher than the 103 that I settled on, but I can't get myself to 225. I can't see any that much margin in here because I know that we can't affect the contracts and such. So that would mean that we would have to lose people. The only way that we can decrease salaries at this point is by losing people. So, any more conversation? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed?
Aye.
Abstained? Motion is not carried. 2-4-0. Hearing that, do we have any additional motions? Are we ready to address something in that $100,000, $125,000 range? Do we think $125,000 is a good number to go with?
I like Jason's number, second best option.
162?
162.
162.
I can't hear what you're saying.
We just took
Oh,
the
just
average.
162?
We took the average.
I know, but I just want to hear what the number
I think
is.
it was 162. I came up
162.
with something a little bit-
It depends on, yeah, if you
Yeah.
take 270 for Camille's number, if you take the average of Ann's, I think I called that 115. I took Jason's and took 115, and I took your 225, and I took my 105. Oh, that's probably, you didn't have my
I
105 in
got
there.
thrown off by the 40, so I put it back into my 115.
Okay. So, do we have a follow-on motion? Do we have a new motion?
I have a new motion.
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to move for a reduction of, and I don't have that number in front of me, the general government budget by $115,000.
We have a motion to decrease the general budget by $115,000. $115,000. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any conversations around the $115,000? The $115,000 is between my first estimate and my current estimate, so I would support 115 as being halfway between 130 something and 103. So if
I'm
that's,
thinking I can't support that, cause if I back out the 40,000, that's only 75.
ah,
Does that include the 40 or not? I was gonna ask the same thing.
It has to include the 40. If she's saying reduce
Mhm.
the budget by 115,
Okay.
it has to include the 40.
Well, is that what you meant?
Actually, I forgot when I did this, because we're out with the 40,
So reduce it by 155.
No, yes, I guess if the 40 is in there, then it would be correct. I stand corrected there. 155, including the,
okay, so you would like to amend your motion to
Yes.
155,000,
Which includes the 3909?
which includes the 3909.
So you're essentially only recommending 115,000?
correct.
Yes,
Correct.
Okay.
okay. And I also amend my seconding of that motion, because again, the same logic.
155.
Yeah, I'll amend it.
Okay.
So I will not support that
Okay,
So,
for previously
so the first
reasons.
motion was for 225,
225.
and this motion is for 155.
This motion is for 155.
I'd like to meet somewhere in the middle, so I don't think I will support this either.
Okay, Jason, you have any comments?
Yeah, I'm the same, maybe we can just meet in the middle.
What'd you say?
Okay. So Jason's a meet in the middle kind of guy. He thinks 155 is not quite high enough yet, but it's also, it is what it is. Okay, any more conversations about $155,000 decrease in the general town budget? Hearing none, all in favor of decreasing the general town budget by $155,000, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Aye, nay, I oppose.
Okay.
Whatever.
Abstained? The motion is defeated, 2-4-0. Okay, so now do I have any further motions to take the average, or I'm just leave it open to anybody have an additional motion that they would like to do? 225 divided, oops, sorry. 225 plus 155 equals divided by 2 equals 190K. But the average was 162. So is there any other motion? I'll make a motion to decrease the town budget by the $162,000 that is an average of the budgets with the exclusion of John's 9,000.
Does it include the 40?
It includes the 40.
So
So you went from 155 to
120
62.
something.
So I only went up 7, yes. Because this one included the 40, this one included the 40, I
Should
included
have
the
done your
40.
averages before.
What was your number, please?
162,
And it does include the 40.
it does include the
So
40.
it's essentially 122.
It's a numeric average of the 4.
I know, but it's essentially 122, pretty much,
Okay.
of an additional cut.
Yes.
Okay.
Do I have a second? Okay, we don't like the numeric average.
I was going to second it,
Okay.
because I think that it's representing the average minus John's outlier, you know, so. And if we're not going to get into the nuances of everything that we are behind or support and have those deep discussions, not bad. I mean, I'll just, if we're having brief conversation here, I guess I'm interjecting myself, but, yeah, I mean, I think it'll be tough. I spent a lot of time with, the various, budget documents and started to look at, the expenditure analysis and where various departments are at this time of year and what's left, and looking at previous years' materials, supplies, overtimes, and it's still looking pretty lean. The budget still looks pretty lean, you know, I'm not, you know, Public Works aside, it's still looking pretty lean, so, you know, I'm reluctant to second it, but I'll second it for the sake of, moving this along, and
You're reluctant because you think it's too much or not enough?
I think it's too much still, but it does represent at least an average, and it might be something that, Mark can work with.
Okay. So
So
I
I
too,
will, so I'll second it.
okay.
So the discussion?
So I've got a motion for 162,000, and I have a second. Is there any discussion on the 162,000 reduction as proposed?
So I have some concerns because over the past 6 or 7 years, I have seen how lean this budget is from an operational standpoint. And I think I've made this comment before, it's like really hard to cut out any more paper clips. If we're gonna make a significant change, we've gotta go for the big ticket items. And we could cut out 162, but then you're gonna start cutting into things that I don't really wanna cut. You know, like I don't wanna cut $25,000 out of the library budget for books, I just wanna cut 5. So if we can't get to the big ticket items of, let's just put a like a freeze on hiring, that's where I'm coming from. So that's why I don't think 162 is enough, because it's not achieving my objective that I set out for this evening.
Okay? Further comments?
Agreed.
I still think it's too high.
Okay. So we're at that point now that half of us think it's too high and the other half thinks it's not high enough. Okay. No more comments? Okay. So the motion before us is to decrease the town general budget by $162,000. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Nay.
Abstained?
Abstain.
Abstained. 3, 2, 1.
Ayes have
Oh, don't you need a
it.
majority?
You were an aye?
Who were the 3? JP?
And
Aye.
Jason and I.
So no. Ayes have it.
You need a majority, right, don't you?
Majority of those who voted, he didn't vote, he chose not to vote. It's a 3-2 vote.
His abstention makes it a 3-2.
You just wanna go home, Jason.
You still have a Board of Ed budget, you still have 3/4 of the budget left.
Okay.
This is only 18,000 of it.
I know, it's,
18 million.
That's still 0.5%, it's fine.
Make that bigger.
Okay, so that means.
So now we're into the Board of Ed budget. Oh,
I mean,
I know.
does anybody want to
Thought they
have a
went home.
conversation about the Board of Ed budget?
Yes, I would like to make a motion to carry on deliberations at a subsequent meeting.
Does
Do
anybody
we
have
do we
a?
have a subsequent meeting?
No, but we can schedule one for next Monday. We can make a motion to add an agenda night.
It's
Sure.
up to you guys. I mean, we can,
I want to talk through it first, and if there's a lot of, I know what I'd like to do. So if we want to talk about the Board of Ed budget, I looked at the Board of Ed budget 2 different ways. I looked at top-down, which means I looked at its relationship to everybody else's budget. To me, one of the challenges I've had for a while for the Board of Ed budget is if it keeps growing faster than the town budget, the proportionality is gonna continue to get worse. And then I looked at it, US inflation plus the cost of increase in insurance, and both of those numbers came out pretty close to each other. And then I went through the budget and I looked at the line items specifically that I thought were too high. As I discussed, I think the increase in security over past years doesn't need to increase as much as it has. I think administrative costs continue to grow faster than the skilled certified labor. And although the tech department wants to grow this summer, it's a blue ribbon school. They're awesome. I think we're doing great with the way we are. So my opinion is we've got to keep the growth of the Board of Ed close to the growth of the rest of the town. So that's kind of how I approach the Board of Ed budget.
So what percentage did we just increase the town budget?
So I used, and this is the one part, before we did that, the town budget grew 2.45%
as proposed.
as proposed. So if I take last year's Board of Ed budget and I increased it by 2.45%, that means that they would get a 350,000 cut over their proposal.
No, this 2.45 is as the budget was presented to the town. We just cut 162,000 out of it. So, Anna, do you have a percentage for us?
Well, that's just my approach. I mean, we can.
Well,
we
but
can-
that's not the number. It was,
we could-
2.45 was proposed, but it's not the number we just voted on.
Yes, no, it's,
And if you want to keep it at the same rate, we need to know what the percentage ended up being for the town.
0.78. Oh, no, we decreased to 0.78. It's
I mean,
really-
I can't do it on my spreadsheet because there's too many changes that were made. I'm not set up
Just give me a
enough to.
second. I think I got it.
this-
And
by the way.
Anna. I get 1.56. Does that make sense, Anna?
Yeah, I'll take a look at it. I was looking for one of my worksheets.
1 minus, open parentheses,
Just for the general, you're looking
parentheses.
for the increase in the general government, right?
Mhm.
Right, Lisa?
Yeah,
So if we have 18,678,733, and we subtract 162 for the general government, we get 18,516,733.
did you subtract the?
Say that last note, say number again, Camille, thank you. Eight, your
So-
subtraction.
So once I subtract the 162,000, I get
Mhm.
18,516,733.
Okay.
Well, I couldn't hear you because Bill coughed. 18,516,000 and what?
18,516,733. So if I take 162,000 and divide it by 18,232,239, no, that makes it worse. That can't be
No,
right.
you gotta subtract the original,
Yeah.
which was 18,638,824.
it's the delta divided by the original.
Yes, I understand.
I know you
Wait,
understand.
so
18,516. What's the difference? So the difference, 18,516,33 less 18,232,239.
Okay, 1.56, Anna got that too.
Oh,
Yeah.
so I did, yeah.
Okay.
156.
So Bill, you're saying because we increased the town budget by 1.56, you think we should increase the Board of Ed budget by 1.56? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
I didn't go through the, oh,
That's low.
it's a percentage. So that would be a $777,000 decrease.
That would be a
seems
little
excessive.
stiff.
I'm sorry, say again?
That would be $778,000.
And Jeff would just have a heart attack right now. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's too much of a cut, for sure.
Yeah. I think the 2.5 makes more sense.
Where are you coming up with 2.45?
That's what it was before we made the decreases,
Not the Board of Ed budget.
The town budget.
the town budget.
I took a slightly different approach. So I said if we limit the increase in the Board of Ed budget this year to 2.25%, we would only need to cut $446,919.
446,919.
Okay.
And the reason why I was trying to back into that number is to try to then project what the mill rate would be. And my goal in this whole process is to try to keep that mill rate under 28. Because I think next year, and the year after that, and the year after that, for the schools and the police station,
Mm-hmm.
446,919.
So what was your cut number? Camille, 4 what?
446.
So I recommended reducing the budget increase by $446,919.
And that'll make the mill rate 28.1.
Did you get 28.1?
Yeah, because
The grand list of, you have the grand list of 2,163,101.52?
I get 27.97. Which, is very, very close. I'm sure I'm missing.
I just divided the total required from taxes by the grand list. So the total required from taxes is 60,784,224.
Camille, what's your basis for that number? You just backed into it from a mill rate, or did you look at the cuts?
Well, I looked at a lot of things. I looked at the increases of the Board of Ed budget over the past, 7
Yeah, and they're high.
years.
Yep.
And the average was a lot higher than the town. And while I don't want to go to a minimum budget restriction, I certainly think, healthcare costs go up, raises are involved. And I think if we, again, I'm of the mind that, we have to adjust personnel to student population. And I think there's some work that we can do there. And so I think if we limit to 2.25, that's going to take care of the healthcare increase and the salary increases. Because I believe the Board of Ed already eliminated a couple of positions through this redistricting plan they have.
Yeah, I too think some staffing reductions could be made. I talked about that the other night at deliberations, and some of the handout information that we got, comparing it to some of the other school systems and some of administrators, and what was brought to our attention, that a lot of the staff salaries for Board of Ed is much higher than for the town. I really want to see us, I was disappointed to hear we didn't offer incentives for the health insurance regarding spouses' insurance and compensating for that. And now we have to wait another 3 years, and I don't know why that issue didn't come up and wasn't suggested. So, it just needs to happen. I don't really understand all the stipends going on in the school budget either. I don't know if that's what happens in other districts. They seem rather stiff. And, but I didn't get a lot of benchmark data with it, so I'm not really sure. It was also suggested that maybe the contracts not be 3-year contracts, and I think that's worthwhile looking at. There's too many dynamics at play here, too many things that can change in a short amount of time, and then we're locked in. So, and often the answer we get is, yeah, it's contractual, we can't do anything about that, but I'm becoming increasingly unwilling to accept that response. So you proposed a cut of 446.
Around 447. Get-
I can get behind you on that.
Okay. Any other comments?
No.
Ron,
I'm
what
not
do you think
gonna
about the Board of Ed budget?
I'm not gonna go into the specifics of how I came up with it, unless you want me to, but I came up with a
Yeah.
number of 693,000.
You wanted to decrease the Board of Ed
Yeah.
budget by
The
693,000.
proposed changes, make sure we're clear on that. Wow.
Do you want to at least high level talk about what areas you think you would cut in order, or what areas made you feel like it was excessive?
Well, I think there's too many personnel people in various job descriptions. I just think this is overweighted. The other thing is a lot of different maintenance and supply lines. And if you look at the individual lines in the descriptions, there's like 6 to 12 different items. It's like a laundry list of things that justify the cost for that line item. I just think there's too much of that. And I'm back which I mentioned last year, and I know there were 2 buses cut, but I still think there's too many buses on the road in connection with the amount of students going on the buses.
Right, and each bus is $50,000 a year.
Yeah, so I think that they could be reduced there. So that's just, the tip of the iceberg of what I looked at. It's just, I don't know, too many people doing the same job. It could be consolidated. The salaries, like was brought up before, are a little higher than they should be, percentage-wise. And there's, like I said, there's too many maintenance supply items, line items,
Okay.
that could be consolidated and reduced. I mean,
So
that's
big,
how. huh?
big picture-wise, you think by decreasing staff, by decreasing some maintenance job descriptions and some bus routes,
Right,
that the school board can decrease their budget by $693,000?
correct.
Camille thinks 445,000, was it 448?
So just to make a point on John's comment, if 700,000, give or take, were to be taken out of the budget, that would limit the increase in the Board of Ed's budget to 1.72, which would put it closer in line with the town of 1.56, if that's your goal, Bill. If it's the $447,000 decrease, again, I was trying to get to a reasonable number of 2.25% increase.
So my goal was to, like I said, look at it both top and down. I did the percentage first so I could see what the target was, and then I went through the budget to see if I could achieve that. My target at the time was 350,000 because I used the other rate, the initial rate, not the revised rate. Ann?
Yeah, well, I'm actually pretty close to Camille's number of about 500,000 reduction recommended for the Board of Education budget. So I tend to start with the revenues. So looking at revenues that kind of get me to that point, or help me get to that point, allow me to. The excess cost-sharing grant, the argument was made that it would be reduced by $205,000. I found no direct evidence for that, so I think that's something that could go back in. On security and safety and that initiative, I'm supportive of having the Board of Ed add the, I believe it was a security person because of Coastal Connections coming to the administration building, and having students of that age, high school age, in that program, and needing that extra security. As we got down that page of the security, safety, additions, I looked in the, let's see what we call this, because their terminology is a little different than Anna's here, but this is just the back of a document that we got in the budget document. We'll call this document Board of Education adopted budget set of docs at the very end. This kind of goes line by line per whatever the item, the salary, whatever. But long story short, for the middle school, the additional part-time security coverage, I'm already seeing 2 security officers there, and that seems to be the pattern of 2 at the high school, 2 at Lily B. Haynes, et cetera, et cetera. So I couldn't really get the fact pattern necessary to be on board with that one. And I also noticed that in looking at this document, I saw rather large increases in the salaried security folks. So I just feel like that whole nut of the, if you will, that whole area of security and safety maybe needs to be re-examined, including what salaries are offered these individuals, and I wasn't sure if they were, if they're unionized, not unionized, or they're private contractors, how we're working this out with them, but, it seemed like the setup for the moment was okay. I mean, I know that there's a yearly report that has to go to the state concerning security and safety, and I'm just not sure where this, suggested amount would, fits in with that. So I just felt like that what I saw in this latter set of documents, et cetera, just didn't support this as well. And I have to, with this caveat, I really, support any absolute needs for security and safety in the schools. 20 years ago, I publicly, in this town, argued for metal detectors post-Columbine. So I feel very strongly about it. So if I'm mistaken here, I'd like to be corrected if there's something I'm missing. But once I started putting the documents together, I got a different story than in the presentation. So again, I may be wrong on that. Again, we can't tell Board of Ed where to cut, but when I was looking through of, what might be somewhat superfluous, supplies and materials, there was rather large percentage increases across all the schools with the exception of Lily B. So I think that's one area. Similarly with repairs and maintenance, another area that, again, I think to support any increase there, I think we just needed clearer documentation, but I think that that's always an area of, consolidation with the town, and I know Jeff's been working on that, and that's really great, and I hope that continues. I kind of circumvented myself here because of the lateness of the hour, but on the revenue side, so when I did ask about all the programs, I had a purpose in that because I didn't see all this revenue in here. And I think these programs are all wonderful. No, this is, aside, but I think there's a sort of financial limbo that these programs are in. So I think they need to be looked at, if I can say, in terms of setting rates that offset, let's say our insurance costs. We have $285,000 a year that the Board of Ed pays for liability insurance. You have these various groups using the facilities. So you've got, wear and tear issues, you've got risk. So I think that, you have to decide, are we gonna have kind of a for-profit programming, not for-profit? What's happening here? But I think at a minimum, that if you're opening your doors to before care, after-school care, creative play school, and again, by state statute, there may be some limitations on this, but the integrated preschool program, I think that, we definitely incur some liabilities, so let's at least offset some of our liability costs with what's happening in these programs. So I think we want to think of them as, special revenue funds and standalone programs, but in my mind, they're not standing alone. I'm sorry, I don't accept that. So I think that there's plenty of work to be done with that. So
you're,
Because there's not a true allocation of costs going back to that program.
to
Like
some
a liability, that's what I
Yes.
hear you're saying. So
Yes.
if there's not a true cost associated, it looks like they are profiting because
well, yes, and that's a whole other issue is that, if there's profits being made and from what I understand from Mariana, some supplies and other things are being purchased, which are to the benefit of the students using the programs and to the benefit of the students at large, because there doesn't seem to be a restriction. Then, what I'm saying is these programs are in some kind of limbo and they need to be released. We need to go forward with them, profit or offsetting liability issues, things like that. So I feel like that's a major hang-up and a reason why the revenues are lacking, And to John's point last week about pay for play or an activities contribution, we've got the large athletic and extracurricular budget. It has lots of moving parts. We discussed that the other night. Even if you took a certain amount from you know, the equipment budget was 38,000, if I can remember correctly. So perhaps, you know, just that one piece could be somehow funded directly, you know. So I put these numbers together and thought, okay, I'm definitely, you know, plus the excess cost sharing grant issue, I'm definitely approaching that $500,000 range.
Okay.
So that's where
So-
I'm at.
So you're thinking about $500,000 with program efficiencies, process efficiencies, revenue increases, just a generic different approach to how the Board of Ed treats their budget.
Yeah, and I didn't even get into personnel. Reason being, I feel like we're at the moment somewhat locked in with that. It's not, you know, there's other ways around that, but I'm just saying I didn't even begin on that side. So I'm just talking about basically a management issue, if you will.
Yeah.
Okay,
So that's my approach.
thank you. Jason? Don't look at the clock.
What do you say?
Don't look at the
Yeah,
clock.
don't look at the clock, yeah. So, yeah, I'm gonna keep it short. I like I didn't think about trying to keep things in line with the town budget, but I think with that reduction of the $162,000, it would be a $700,000 reduction to the Board of Ed, or $800,000, which I think would be a little steep. So, again, I'm a average kind of person, so I would tend to actually side with John on this. It's such a large budget that when I go through it, I get lost in the minutia of it. Not necessarily minutia, but it's so involved. So I would, to try to keep it under 28. I think we'd have to be about 600,000 cut to the Board of Ed to have a mill rate under 28. Is that about right?
I have a slightly different number than Bill.
If I do 600, then the mill rate would be, I think, 28.025,
Right. Yeah.
I think. And again, this is just taking the total taxes required and dividing it by the grand list.
Right.
Okay,
Right. And the thing is, it's going forward that with the new school renovations, the police station, that we're looking at a mill increase every year for the next 3 years. So in the blink of an eye, we're going to be at 31, and you know that's going to be one of the higher towns in our area. So
okay.
I don't know what the right answer is, but that's where I am.
Okay, so if I believe that Jason believes that, I don't know why I lead twice, but Jason 600,000 and 500,000, John 693, Camille and Lisa 447, and I'm still,
We're the easy ones.
I think I'm still at 350. I have a hard time getting down below 350. If I take the numerical average of those numbers, it's 506. So Ann wins.
So I'm just gonna say this again, it won't be pretty, but we chose to have 3 elementary schools. And I'm still not convinced that we needed 3, but, you know, gotta pay for them. So,
Okay, so, any other further conversations about our Board of Ed budget? Hearing none, do I hear a motion? Does anybody have a motion that they would like to move forward?
well, so I'll make a motion based on what I heard everybody say here. And I don't do averages, but you can take my motion or leave it. So I was surprised to hear John say 693. I think my first number was heard and it would have been aghast, and now mine's gonna be a bargain. But, based on what I'm hearing from everybody here, I'm gonna make a motion to cut the proposed Board of Education budget by $500,000.
I'll second that.
I have a motion to cut the Board of Ed budget by 500,000, and I have a second, $500,000, yes. Any further conversations about the motion in front of us? How do we feel about $500,000 cut to the Board of Ed budget?
It's very close to the number I came up with. I can get behind that.
Yeah. What's the percentage increase on that?
Well, it's about a $49 million budget, right? So that's basically 1%. It's round math. Okay, so my humble opinion, that's more than I would expect, but it is a 1% reduction in budget, and 1% should hopefully be something that they can manage.
To answer Jason's question, a $500,000 reduction in the Board of Ed budget would still represent a 2.14% increase.
Yeah, so I mean,
Was your question an increase, or how much was that cut in it?
I think it was a percentage.
Okay,
Yeah.
it's still a 2% increase, yes. So go, okay.
So,
All right, any other discussion about our,
it's in the neck of the woods.
Yeah.
so what was that number, Camille? 2.37 as opposed to the proposed 3.18, right? So,
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, I said 2.25, that was my number. Theirs is 3.18,
that's
and it would go down to 2.14.
to 2.14, which is still greater than the cost of living, average cost of living numbers that we've talked about earlier. It's still a larger increase than the town is bearing. So, I don't know, it feels pretty good to me.
There still is a chance that maybe some of that vacant space from Learn can be filled,
Well, we've been talking about that for a couple of years.
right? But now
Nothing's-
there's extra incentive to get that space filled.
And we should just give the bargain price of not even cutting out the 10,386 for the vehicle. We'll let that go.
okay.
Can be wrapped.
Any further discussion about the motion before us?
Well,
No?
I took a second look and,
You ready to go for 800,000?
yeah.
Man, you're the butcher man tonight.
I thought it was,
9,000 for the
I thought it
town.
was for the town. I thought it was,
Wow.
anyway, I took a second look and I came up with 543, but if the majority of the board thinks 500 is reasonable, I'll go with that.
Okay, any further conversation about the motion before us? I got one other thing I want to add. No, okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? I'm going to say opposed. I think it's too much. Abstained? So moved. 5-1-0. All right, so now we have to have a follow-on meeting so that the amended town budget can come back to us and Mr. Nickerson can show us how he made the magic happen. So I think we want to schedule a new meeting for next Monday, if that's going to be too early, or is that okay? Can we, is everybody available?
Why not?
Then we would end up canceling the 22nd if we didn't need it.
I'm gonna do that.
Yeah,
Yeah, cancel that. Cancel it twice.
okay.
What time? 6:30?
So we all good for Monday at 6:30?
That's the 15th?
Sounds good.
Monday the 15th, yes.
Next Monday at 6:30.
Monday at 6:30?
Why was the 22nd on there, though?
It's a contingency,
It
but
was,
that's going to be a
like in
long
case
time
we
before we
needed
can
it.
get
A
his
long time
responses.
before,
So we'll
okay.
cancel that meeting
I see what- I
and we'll
see.
just move it up further.
Okay.
All right, so I'm hearing 6:30 on 4/8/15, is that correct?
You're gonna cancel the 22nd?
We'll cancel it, if we resolve everything on the 15th, we'll cancel the 22nd. Okay,
Okay, it's to get all the data that we
where's
just
my
did.
agenda?
Input.
So what, is there anything else on the agenda?
No, just the public delegation or the public comments.
I'm sure they're thrown.
All right. Public discussion. Anybody from the public that want to come talk to us? Hearing none. Board comments. Anybody on the board have any comments?
I do. I just want to say, this board is awesome. I think this board is really, really do their homework. And I'm just really impressed with the process this year. And I think everybody really did a good job of trying to look under every rock, as Lisa would say. So, thank you, everyone.
I'll second it.
Yeah.
And all the hours. A lot of overtime. All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Getting